Imagine a time when the streets were gripped by fear, and every shadow held the potential for danger. Imagine a killer so bold, so enigmatic, that he not only terrorized a community, but left a mark on a whole genre of American culture. Young couples found dead in their cars, a taxi driver murdered on a quiet street, strange symbols scrawled in blood. But it wasn't just the killing that terrified a community. It was the silence between the murders, the waiting, the knowing that somewhere out there, someone was watching, planning. This isn't the plot of a Hollywood thriller. This is the real-life story of the Zodiac Killer, a figure who to this day remains unidentified, leaving us with more questions than answers. He was a phantom who walked among the living, who might have sat next to you at a diner, passed you on the street, or even stood behind you in line at the movies. That was his true power. Not just the lives he took, but the paranoia he planted in the minds of millions. But what makes the Zodiac Killer so compelling? It's not just the gruesome nature of his crimes. It's the psychological warfare he waged through his letters, filled with riddles that challenged even the brightest minds. Some say he's still out there, watching as we retell his story. Others believe he took his secrets to the grave, leaving behind a mystery that would torture detectives and fascinate filmmakers for generations to come. Today, we're unmasking the secrets of the Zodiac.
This is the Zodiac speaking.
It's December 20th, 1968, on the outskirts of Benicia, California. A young couple, Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, are out on their first date. They park at Lover's Lane, just chatting and enjoying each other's company. Little did they know that this innocent outing would end in tragedy. They were both shot. According to the police report, the victims were apparently approached while sitting in Faraday's station wagon. Shots were fired into the vehicle in an apparent effort to force them out. Betty Lou exited the front passenger door first, followed by Faraday, who was then shot as he emerged from the car. Betty Lou was shot as she fled on foot and was found 28 feet away from the vehicle. It was the first date she'd ever been allowed to go on, and the crime shocked the community. Betty and David's classmates even put up a reward to help find the killer, but it ultimately led to nothing. Fast forward to July 4th, 1969, Independence Day. While the rest of the country was celebrating, another young couple, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Magoo, were attacked at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. Darlene was married and worked as a waitress at Terry's restaurant, and Michael was single and worked as a laborer. So, oddly, why were they together? Darlene's husband, Dean, was initially a suspect in the murder. However, he was ruled out once it was established he was working as a cook at Caesar's restaurant. Darlene's first husband, James Phillips Crabtree, was also briefly a suspect, but police could never find evidence linking him to the case. So who could have done this? When Michael was in the hospital, he claimed he and Ferrin had parked at the isolated location just to have a talk. But a car, possibly a light brown Ford Mustang or Chevrolet Corvair, pulled into the lot just a few feet away. That's when a man with a flashlight exited the vehicle and approached them. There were no other cars in the parking lot. And upon thinking it was a police officer, the couple had their identification ready. But without warning, the man began firing at the couple. After 5 shots were fired, the man walked away slowly back to his car. Michael screamed in pain, at which point the man returned and fired 2 more shots into each victim. It was at this point that Michael got a good look at him. The man was white, 5'8" to 5'9", late 20s to early 30s, stocky build, round face, and brown hair. Then strangely, approximately 45 minutes later, the Vallejo Police Department received a call from a man claiming responsibility for the attack. He correctly identified the weapon used as a 9mm and also took credit for the Faraday Jensen murders back on December 20th of 1968. For the next few weeks, the investigation went nowhere. No calls, no leads, nothing. Then, on July 31st, 1969, letters were sent to the Vallejo Times-Herald, San Francisco Examiner, and San Francisco Chronicle. The letters claimed to be from the killer of all 3 victims, Faraday, Jensen, and Ferrin. Details were included that only the killer could have known, and each letter contained 1/3 of a cipher that, if solved, supposedly contained the killer's true identity. The letters also came with a chilling demand. publish these cryptograms on the front page or more murders would follow. It was in these letters that the killer first used the name Zodiac, while also ending with the now famous crossed circle symbol. This was the beginning of a series of letters and phone calls that would keep the Bay Area on edge for years to come.
The Zodiac killer seems to crave publicity. He sent letters and cryptograms to newspapers and the police.
Now, you might be wondering, did anyone crack this code? Well, yes and no. Donald Hardin was a high school teacher at North Salinas High School, teaching history and economics. He and his wife, Betty, solved the cipher about a week after it was published. They claimed it took them around 20 hours of work to finally crack the code, and that they did it by looking for all 4 letter patterns that might fit the word kill. But here's the kicker. It didn't reveal the killer's identity as promised. Instead, it contained a rambling message about how killing was the most dangerous game someone could play. I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most hunger-to animal of all to kill. But the Zodiac wasn't done. On September 27, 1969, he struck again at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. This time, his approach was even more terrifying. Dressed in an executioner-style hood and a bib with the infamous crossed circle symbol, he approached a young couple, Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell, who were picnicking by the lake. He tied them up and stabbed them repeatedly. According to the police report, the couple was relaxing on a blanket at a very remote location by the lake. That's when Cecilia noticed a man approaching them wearing a weird-looking costume and holding a gun. He appeared to be more than 6 feet tall with a heavy build. The man claimed he was a prison escapee from either Montana or Colorado and needed money and a car to flee to Mexico. Hartnell offered his wallet and car keys, but he wouldn't take them. After several minutes of conversation, the man tied them up with plastic clothesline and began stabbing them. Hartnell was attacked first, then Cecilia. After the assault, the man is said to have walked casually away from the scene as if nothing even happened. After several minutes, a nearby fisherman heard the couple screaming and alerted park rangers. By the time help arrived, Shepard and Hartnell had managed to untie their restraints. It took nearly an hour for an ambulance to arrive, at which time both victims were in critical condition. Then, oddly enough, just over an hour after the attack, the Napa Police Department received a call from a man claiming responsibility for the stabbing. The call was quickly traced to a phone booth in downtown Napa, and fingerprints were later recovered. But once again, it led to nothing. Meanwhile, deputies were responding to the crime scene. They found that the attacker had written a message on the victim's car door. The message included the dates of the Faraday-Jensen and Farron-Magoo attacks and was signed with the cross-circle symbol. There were also tire tracks indicating that the killer had parked behind the victim's car. After recovering shoe prints from the scene, they discovered the killer was wearing size 10.5 wing walker shoes, also indicating the suspect weighed more than 210 pounds. Detectives later located 3 young women who'd noticed a strange man in the general area just a couple hours before the attack, which they later used to create more accurate sketches of the Zodiac. After the attack, although she fought hard, Cecilia Shepard died within 48 hours of the stabbing. Her funeral services attracted a huge crowd of people. Hartnell eventually recovered from his wounds, and he's now an attorney in Southern California. While Brian gave many interviews in the first few years after the attack, he's no longer discussing the case with the media. Just 2 weeks later, on October 11, 1969, the Zodiac claimed his last confirmed victim in San Francisco. Taxi driver Paul Stine was shot in the head in his cab. This crime was different from the others. It was in an urban area, and the victim was a man alone, rather than a couple. It also provided the closest thing we have to a description of the Zodiac, as 3 teenagers witnessed the killer wiping down the cab and walking away. The police report states that Stine's cab was hailed at Mason and Geary Streets, with the intended destination being Washington and Maple Streets near the Presidio. For reasons unknown, the cab ended up at Washington and Cherry Streets, a block away from the original destination. Stine's wallet and keys were taken, and a large portion of his shirt was discovered to be carefully torn off. Bloody fingerprints, potentially of the suspect, were also recovered from the vehicle. According to a police report, a pair of men's size 7 black gloves was also found. The 3 witnesses watched the suspect from approximately 60 feet away as he wiped down the cab with a cloth after killing Stine. They called the police and described a white male, 25 to 30 years old, 5'8" to 5'9", stocky build, reddish-brown hair with a crew cut, heavy-rimmed glasses, and dark clothing. They last saw him casually walking north on Cherry Street. Unfortunately, the police dispatcher mistakenly described the suspect as being a black male adult. As a result, when patrol officers Donald Fruke and Eric Zelms later observed a white man walking east on Jackson Street, he was never stopped and questioned. The officers did get a good look at him, but it wasn't the man they were looking for. However, when the correct description of the suspect was finally broadcast, the officers realized they might have encountered him. A search of the area where the man had been observed was conducted, but nothing was found. The man seen by Fruke and Zelms was very similar to the suspect observed by the three witnesses. He was white, 35 to 45 years old, 5'10", between 180 and 200 pounds, stocky build with light-colored crew-cut hair, and wearing glasses. The Stein murder was initially thought to be a routine cabbie killing, a robbery gone bad. However, on October 13, 1969, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter from Zodiac and the piece of the bloody shirt, claiming he was responsible for the cab murder. SFPD inspectors Dave Toshi and Bill Armstrong, who were assigned to the case, were shocked to realize the shirt belonged to Stein. But things were about to get even darker. The Zodiac would claim he actually spoke with the patrolman the night of the murder, leading them astray. The three witnesses eventually worked with a police composite artist to put a face to the Zodiac. A few days after the sketch was circulated throughout the Bay Area in the form of a wanted poster, the witnesses requested the sketch be altered to make it more accurate. Thus, another version was made, giving us the infamous photo we know today. More than a month after Stein's murder, Officer Fruke finally came forward about his possible encounter with the killer, stating he's unclear whether he encountered the Zodiac that night. Throughout this period, and for several years after, the Zodiac continued to send letters to the press. These weren't just any letters. They were a bizarre mix of threats, boasts, and more cryptic messages. In one of these cryptics, he claimed to have killed 37 people. In another, he threatened to blow up a school bus, writing, "Bus goes bang, car passes by okay." One of the most famous of these letters was the Halloween card sent to the San Francisco Chronicle in October 1970. This eerie greeting card featured a skeleton and the words "boo" inside, along with another cryptic message. "I feel it in my bones, you ache to know my name, and so I'll clue you in." It's details like these that show just how much the Zodiac seemed to revel in the fear and attention his crimes generated. Now, you might be wondering, why couldn't the police catch this guy? Well, it wasn't for lack of trying. The Zodiac killer case became one of the most intensive manhunts in California history. Multiple law enforcement agencies were involved, including local police departments, the California Department of Justice, and even the FBI. The problem was the Zodiac was incredibly careful. He left very little physical evidence at his crime scenes. The few fingerprints found didn't match anyone in the system. The descriptions from survivors and witnesses were vague and sometimes contradict one another. And remember those cryptograms? While some were solved, others remain unbroken to this day, potentially holding clues that could crack the case wide open. But here's the thing that really sets the Zodiac killer case apart: its impact on popular culture. This wasn't just another serial killer case. It became a cultural phenomenon. The combination of the brutal murders, the taunting letters, and the unsolved ciphers captured the public imagination in a way few other cases have. Think about it. How many other criminal cases can you name that have inspired multiple Hollywood movies, countless books, and even board games? The Zodiac killer case has been the subject of intense speculation and amateur investigations for decades. It spawned a whole subculture of Zodiac hunters who are people dedicated to solving the case on their own. And it's not hard to see why. The case has all the elements of a gripping mystery novel. You've got the enigmatic killer who seems to always be one step ahead of the law. You've got the cryptic clues that could hold the key to solving the case. And you've got the lingering possibility that the killer might still be out there. Maybe even watching documentaries about his crimes, thinking to himself how he got away with it. The case also had a profound impact on the Bay Area community as a whole. Can you imagine the fear and paranoia that must have run through the homes of families during the Zodiac's active period? People were afraid to go out at night, especially to secluded areas. Parents were terrified for their children's safety. The Zodiac's threats to attack a school bus only heightened this fear. And yet, ironically, the case also brought people together. Communities banded together for safety. People looked out for each other more. The shared experience of living through this period of fear and uncertainty created a kind of collective trauma that still resonates in the Bay Area today. Throughout the years, there's been a lot of people who came forward claiming to know the true identity of the Zodiac, but no names ever held as much weight as Arthur Lee Allen. The first thing to understand is that Allen was the only suspect ever publicly named by the police in connection with the Zodiac killer case. This fact alone sets him apart from the numerous other individuals who have been suggested as potential Zodiac suspects over the years. But what made the police focus on Allen in particular? One of the key factors was a series of circumstantial connections between Allen and the Zodiac crimes. For example, Allen lived in Vallejo, where several of the Zodiac's attacks took place. He was known to frequently visit the areas where the murders occurred. Perhaps the most crazy of them all is that Allen was reportedly in the vicinity of Lake Berryessa on the day the Zodiac killer attacked Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard in September of 1969. But the connections didn't stop there. Allen's behavior and statements also raised suspicions. According to some reports, Allen made statements to acquaintances that eerily mirrored aspects of the Zodiac case. He allegedly told a friend about his idea for a story about a killer who murdered couples and then sent taunting letters to the police. Sound familiar? To go even deeper, Allen owned several of the items that were similar to those described by witnesses or mentioned in the Zodiac's letters. He was known to wear a Zodiac brand watch, which bore the same crossed circle symbol that the killer used as a signature. He also owned boots that matched the footprints found at one of the crime scenes. Something even more eerie was that the Zodiac killer was notorious for his distinctive writing style, which included numerous spelling errors. Words like Christmas were spelled with 2 S's at the end, trigger missing a G, and paradise with a C. Things were consistently misspelled in the Zodiac's communications. Interestingly, Arthur Lee Allen was also known to make similar spelling errors in his personal writings. This correlation caught the attention of investigators. Some argued that the consistent nature of these misspellings in both the Zodiac's letters and Allen's writings were too coincidental to ignore. Some have argued that the Zodiac's misspellings may have been intentional, either to disguise his identity or to create a specific persona. Despite all these seemingly damning pieces of evidence, you might be wondering why Allen was never charged with the Zodiac crimes. Well, that's because the nature of the evidence against him was almost entirely circumstantial. While there were numerous connections between Allen and the Zodiac case, there was a huge lack of concrete physical evidence linking him directly to the crimes. No fingerprints matching Allen's were found at the crime scenes. The handwriting samples provided by Allen didn't match the Zodiac's distinctive writing. And perhaps most damaging to the case against Allen was that the DNA tests conducted on saliva from the Zodiac's letters didn't match Allen's DNA. Not only that, but there were inconsistencies in witness testimonies that complicated the case against Allen. While some witnesses identified Allen as resembling the Zodiac, others provided descriptions that didn't match him at all. For instance, survivor Michael Magoo initially described the Zodiac as being shorter and heavier than Allen. It's worth noting that Allen himself had adamantly denied being the Zodiac killer throughout his life. In interviews, he maintained his innocence, stating, "I know that deep in my soul. I've never been known for good luck, and I guess this is pretty much living proof of it. I couldn't murder anyone."
Are you a murderer?
No.
Are you the Zodiac killer?
No, definitely not. No. I couldn't murder anyone.
Allen claimed that the police investigation was influenced by unreliable witness accounts and suggested that another suspect, Ralph Spinelli, was attempting to implicate him to plea bargain on multiple armed robbery charges. The investigation into Allen as a Zodiac suspect was extensive. Detective Jack Mullinax of the Vallejo Police Department conducted a thorough background check on Allen. He discovered Allen's previous arrest for disturbing the peace and uncovered several incident reports involving Allen, though in these cases Allen was either a victim or a witness to a crime, not a perpetrator. Mullinax also interviewed Allen's former employer, the owner of a service station in Vallejo. The owner described Allen as an honest and hard worker, but noted that Allen showed an uncomfortable level of interest in small children. This interest extended to an incident where Allen allegedly took the owner's young daughter on his boat without permission and made improper advances towards her. However, the investigation also turned up some contradictory information, leading Allen to be exonerated and the case being overlooked. While some reports painted Allen in a negative light, Mullinax found that Allen had an excellent reputation among many of his neighbors who had known him since childhood, which was odd for someone who was thought to be a ruthless killer. On August 4th, 1971, Mullinax, along with Inspectors Dave Toschi and Bill Armstrong, interviewed Allen at his workplace. Allen denied making any incriminating statements about the Zodiac case. He claimed to have only a passing interest in the case, describing it as too morbid to follow closely. Interestingly, during this interview, Allen, without being questioned, brought up an issue of knives with blood on them. This unprompted mention of potential evidence raised suspicions, although Allen quickly explained that the blood was from a chicken he'd killed. Despite the suspicions surrounding Allen, the case against him remained largely circumstantial. The lack of conclusive physical evidence, combined with inconsistencies in witness testimonies and Allen's own denials, meant that prosecutors never felt they had enough to bring charges against him. Allen's life, after becoming a Zodiac suspect, was far from easy. He seemed to have a complex relationship with the attention that came with being associated with the case. Some witnesses reported that Allen initially seemed to enjoy the attention of being labeled a Zodiac suspect, perhaps seeing it as a way to project toughness and reverse his reputation as a convicted child predator. However, as time went on and the accusations persisted, Allen reportedly grew weary of the ongoing suspicion. In one of his final interviews, he expressed frustration with the investigative process, stating, "There are two types of liars in the world, fishermen and policemen," implying a distrust in the motives of law enforcement.
There are two types of liars in the world, fishermen and policemen, and not necessarily in that order.
Although Allen always stated he was innocent, new evidence has come to light in the new Netflix documentary, This is the Zodiac Speaking. These revelations have not only reignited interest in Allen as a suspect, but have also raised serious questions about the thoroughness of the original investigation. At the heart of these new revelations is the testimony of the Seawater siblings, David, Connie, and Don. These individuals knew Arthur Lee Allen from during their childhood. Mr. Allen had been their elementary school teacher and a family friend. Their accounts provide a unique and disturbing perspective on the man who may have been the Zodiac killer. Let's start with perhaps the most shocking claim made by the Seawaters, Allen's alleged confession. According to David Seawater, Allen admitted to being the Zodiac killer during a phone call in 1992, shortly before Allen's death. David recounts that Allen was gravely ill at the time, and Allen's mother had urged David to reach out to her son. During this conversation, Allen reportedly made a series of startling confessions. First, he confessed to drugging and sexually assaulting Connie, David's sister, years earlier when they were just kids. This shocking revelation prompted David to ask the question that had likely been on his mind for years. Was Arthur Lee Allen the Zodiac killer? According to David, Allen said yes, confessing that he was indeed the infamous serial killer. This alleged confession is a bombshell, to say the least. If true, it would seemingly solve one of the most notorious cold cases in American history. However, it's important to approach this claim with a critical eye. Allen was near death at the time of the alleged confession, and there's no recording or other corroborating evidence of this conversation. Still, the fact that David Seawater had come forward with this information decades later lends some credibility to his account. Connie Seawater also recounts a chilling interaction with Allen in 1991, just a year before his death. During a sailing trip, she directly asked Allen if he was the Zodiac killer. His response was cryptic and unsettling. He reportedly told her that if he answered that question, he'd have to kill her. At the time, Connie thought it was a joke, but in light of other revelations, she now views the comment much more seriously. But the Seawaters revelations don't stop there. Perhaps even more chilling are their claims about being taken to murder sites before the killings occurred. The siblings allege that Alan would take them on weekend trips or visits to various locations around California. In retrospect, they believe some of these trips may have connected to the Zodiac killings. One particularly disturbing account involves a trip to Tahiguas Beach in 1963. The Seawaters recall Alan taking them there for what was supposed to be a day trip. However, upon arrival, Alan reportedly left him alone in the car and told him not to leave. But being kids, they say they got out of the car and began playing. When he returned, they noticed his hands appeared to be red, and he seemed to be in a state of panic. Alan hurriedly ushered them back into the car and fled the scene. This incident takes on a sinister significance when we consider that on June 4th, 1963, a double murder occurred at Tahiguas Beach. Roberto Domingos and Linda Edwards, a young couple, were brutally shot and killed in a manner that bore striking similarities to later Zodiac attacks. While this murder was never officially attributed to the Zodiac killer, the parallels are hard to ignore. The victims were students at nearby Lompoc High School and were participating in Senior Ditch Day, a local tradition among students close to graduation. Instead of celebrating with classmates at another location, Domingos and Edwards chose to be alone at an isolated stretch of the beach. Apparently, the killer approached while they were sunbathing. It's thought that Edwards was forced to tie up Domingos while at gunpoint, but both victims attempted to flee and were shot numerous times. The precision of the shooting made the police believe that the killer had some level of expertise with firearms. The bodies were then dragged approximately 30 feet to an empty shack, and Edwards was placed on top of Domingos with her bathing suit top cut off. The killer then attempted to set the shack on fire with a match, but it didn't work. All these consistencies, the ammo, tying up the victims, using a knife, could it have been Arthur Lee Allen or an unknown assailant? The Seawaters' memories of these trips were reportedly reignited when they saw David Fincher's 2007 film Zodiac. The movie, known for its incredible attention to detail, used the exact locations of the Zodiac murders in its filming. Seeing these locations on the screen triggered the Seawaters' memories, leading them to connect the dots between their childhood experiences with Alan and the Zodiac case. These new claims by the Seawaters have significant implications for the Zodiac case. First and foremost, they've reignited interest in Arthur Lee Allen as the prime suspect. While Allen was always considered a person of interest in the case, these new revelations provide a more intimate look at his behavior and potential connection to the crimes. The Seawaters testimony also raises serious questions about the thoroughness of the original investigation. If their accounts are accurate, it suggests that there were potential witnesses who were never fully questioned or investigated. Who was that, you might ask? The Seawaters. Imagine if they would have been interviewed about Allen at the beginning of the investigation. Things could have gone very differently. This massive oversight could have resulted in crucial evidence being overlooked. The Seawaters' claims potentially expand the timeline and scope of the Zodiac's crimes. The incident at Tahiguas Beach in 1963, if indeed connected to Allen and the Zodiac, would predate the officially recognized start of the Zodiac's killing spree by several years. This raises the possibility that the Zodiac may have been active for longer and may have committed more crimes than previously thought. It's important to note that while these revelations are compelling, they're still largely based on memories and recollections from decades ago. The passage of time can affect the accuracy of memories, and without corroborating physical evidence, these claims remain in the realm of circumstantial evidence. However, the Seawaters' testimony does align with and potentially expand some previously known facts about the case. For instance, the stoppage of Zodiac killings and letters in the mid-1970s coincides with Allen's arrest and imprisonment for child molestation, meaning, oddly enough, the Zodiac disappeared during this time. Or was he just put away? The Seawaters' account of Allen's behavior and statements over the years also seems to match the profile of the Zodiac killer that investigators had developed. Another intriguing piece of evidence that has emerged from the Seawaters revelations is a collection of letters found after their mother's death in 2017. Phyllis Seawater, the siblings' mother, had instructed David before her death that he would find a box that would explain everything after she passed away. When the siblings found this box, it contained letters from Alan with some disturbing content. In these letters, Alan made statements such as, "I almost decided to confess to finally bring it to an end," and referred to police dealing with us mass killers and all. These writings, if authentic, provide a haunting glimpse into Alan's mind and seem to support the idea that he may indeed have been the Zodiac Killer. The Seawaters revelations have also led to new physical evidence being examined. A knife that Alan had given to Connie's son is currently being analyzed by forensic scientists. While the results of these tests are not yet known, they could potentially provide more definitive evidence linking Alan to the Zodiac crimes. It's worth noting that the Seawaters' decision to come forward with their story was not an easy one. They describe feeling conflicted about their memories of Alan, who played a significant role in their childhood. The realization that someone they knew, and in some ways cared for, could be responsible for such horrific crimes has been deeply traumatic for them. Their testimony also sheds light on the long-lasting impact of the Zodiac case on those connected to it, even peripherally. The Seawaters have lived with these memories and suspicions for decades, only recently feeling able to share their story publicly. The revelations from This Is the Zodiac Speaking have undoubtedly added a new chapter to the Zodiac Killer saga. They've provided a more personal, intimate look at Arthur Lee Allen and his potential connection to the crimes. While they don't definitively solve the case, they do offer new avenues for investigation and consideration. The Zodiac Killer case has left an indelible mark on American popular culture, particularly in the realm of cinema. The mysterious nature of the killer, the cryptic messages, and the unsolved status of the case has provided filmmakers with rich material for decades. One of the earliest and most notable films inspired by the Zodiac case is Dirty Harry, released in 1971, directed by Don Siegel and starring Clint Eastwood. While not directly based on the Zodiac Killer, the film's antagonist, Scorpio, is clearly inspired by the real-life case. Scorpio, like the Zodiac, sends taunting letters to the police and threatens to kill a bus full of children, a threat that mirrors one made by the real Zodiac Killer. Dirty Harry set a template for how the Zodiac-inspired killer would be portrayed in cinema, a taunting, mysterious figure who seems to always be one step ahead of the law. The film's gritty, realistic portrayal of San Francisco and its focus on the psychological toll the investigation puts on Inspector Harry Callahan would influence many later films about the Zodiac case. In 1971, we also saw the release of The Zodiac Killer, a low-budget exploitation film directed by Tom Hansen. This film took a more direct approach, attempting to dramatize the actual Zodiac case. While not critically acclaimed, it's notable for being one of the first films to directly tackle the Zodiac story. As the years went on, the Zodiac case continued to inspire filmmakers. In 1983, we saw the release of Zodiac Killer, directed by Uli Lommel. This film took significant liberties with the real case, creating a fictional backstory for the killer. While not particularly well received, it demonstrates the ongoing fascination with the Zodiac case in popular culture. The 1990s saw the release of The Exorcist III, which, while not directly about the Zodiac, featured a serial killer character clearly inspired by him, the Gemini Killer. In this film, he leaves cryptic clues and taunting messages, much like the real Zodiac. However, it wasn't until 2007 that we got what many consider to be the definitive cinematic treatment of the Zodiac case that we deserved: David Fincher's Zodiac. This film, based on Robert Graysmith's book about the case, is a masterclass in how to adapt a true crime story for the screen. Fincher's Zodiac stands out for its meticulous attention to detail and its focus on the investigation rather than the killer. This film follows three main characters: Robert Graysmith, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, a cartoonist turned amateur investigator; Paul Avery, played by Robert Downey Jr., a journalist covering the case; and Dave Toschi, played by Mark Ruffalo. the lead detective on the Zodiac investigation. What sets this Zodiac portrayal apart from the rest is its approach to the material. Rather than sensationalizing the killings or trying to definitively solve the case, Fincher focuses on the obsession that drives the investigation. We see how the case consumes the lives of those trying to solve it, particularly Graysmith, whose pursuit of the truth spans decades. Fincher's film is also notable for its portrayal of the investigation process. It shows the painstaking work of following leads, cross-referencing evidence, and the frustration of dead ends. This approach gives viewers a sense of the real challenges faced by the investigators working on such a complex case. The film's visual style is also worth noting. Fincher used digital technology to recreate 1970 San Francisco with stunning accuracy. This attention to detail extends to the recreation of the Zodiac crimes, which are portrayed with chilling realism. Zodiac has been praised for its historical accuracy. Fincher and his team spent years researching the case, interviewing witnesses, and absorbed in police reports. This commitment to accuracy shows a sense of authenticity that sets it apart from many other true crime adaptations. The film's impact on the true crime genre has been significant. It demonstrated that a true crime story could be told with the depth and complexity of a drama movie. Zodiac showed that the process of investigation could be just as compelling as the crimes themselves. Following Zodiac, we've seen a surge in high-quality true crime productions, both in film and television. Series like Making a Murder, The Jinx, and American Crime Story have all taken cues from Fincher's approach, focusing on the details of the investigations and the impact of unsolved crimes on those involved in solving them. The Zodiac case has also inspired numerous documentaries. This is the Zodiac Speaking, released in 2008, and The Hunt for the Zodiac Killer, released in 2017, are just two examples of how the case continues to fascinate filmmakers and audiences alike. These documentaries often take a more journalistic approach, presenting new evidence and theories about the case. One of the most interesting aspects of Zodiac-inspired cinema is how it portrays the killer himself. In most films, including Fincher's Zodiac, the killer remains an enigma. We rarely see his face clearly, and his motivations remain obscured. This approach mirrors the real-life mystery of the Zodiac and adds to the sense of unease and frustration that permeates these films. The exploration of suspects is another common thread in Zodiac-inspired cinema. Many films and documentaries focus on Arthur Lee Allen, the prime suspect in the case. David Fincher's Zodiac devotes significant time to investigating Allen, showing how the evidence both implicates and exonerates him. This focus on suspects adds another layer of complexity to these narratives, as viewers are invited to play detective along with the characters. The impact of the Zodiac case on the true crime genre extends beyond just inspiring individual films. It's reshaped how we think about unsolved cases and serial killers in popular culture. The image of the taunting killer who outsmarts the police has become a trope in countless films and TV shows. The Zodiac case has influenced how true crime stories are told. The emphasis on ciphers and coded messages in the Zodiac case have inspired many filmmakers to incorporate similar elements into their narratives. This adds an interactive element to these stories, allowing the viewers to attempt to decode the clues alongside the characters. The case has also sparked a broader public interest in unsolved crimes. Many viewers, inspired by films like Zodiac, have become amateur investigators themselves, poring over evidence and developing their own theories. This phenomenon has been amplified in the internet age, with numerous forums and websites dedicated to discussing and analyzing the Zodiac case and others like it. In recent years, we've seen the influence of the Zodiac case extend even further. The 2022 film The Batman features a version of the Riddler that's clearly inspired by the Zodiac Killer. This demonstrates how the iconography and mythology of the Zodiac case have permeated popular culture, inspiring characters and storylines even in superhero blockbusters. For over half a century, the Zodiac Killer has danced on the edges of our understanding, leaving behind a trail of encrypted messages and unanswered questions. Each breakthrough in the case has only served to deepen the mystery. adding layers to an already confusing puzzle. What makes this case endure isn't just its unsolved status. It's the way it speaks to something fundamental in human nature. Our need to make sense of the senselessness. Our desire to find order in chaos. The Zodiac Killer understood this odd human trait, crafting a narrative that would outlive his crimes, weaving a web of symbols and ciphers that continues to entangle the minds of investigators, cryptographers, and amateur sleuths. The case has transcended its origins as a criminal investigation to become something more, a modern mythology, a cautionary tale. A reminder that sometimes the most terrifying truths are those that remain just beyond our grasp. With each passing year, the mystery doesn't diminish, it evolves, finding new life in the imaginations of filmmakers, writers, and audiences worldwide. The case of the Zodiac reminds us that even in an age of instant answers and access to the internet, some questions remain stubbornly and hauntingly unanswered. Will it soon be solved? Or will the Zodiac remain what he's always been? A cipher waiting to be broken, a story without an ending, and a mystery that refuses to die.
This is